Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're going deep, really deep, into something we all do every single day, thinking and making decisions.
Decisions. Big ones, little ones, they shape our lives.
And you know what? You sent over some really interesting stuff about, get this, a Nobel Prize winner, Daniel Kahneman.
Oh yeah, Kahneman. He basically gives us this secret decoder ring for our own minds.
It is pretty amazing. And by diving into his work, I think we can help folks understand their own thought processes better. So let's get to the heart of it. How do these fast and slow systems in our brains, the ones Kahneman talks about, how do they actually influence our choices? And how can we use that knowledge to make better decisions, maybe even avoid some of those, face palm moments we all have?
Okay, so Kahneman's work really boils down to the idea that we have these two modes of thinking. He calls them System 1 and System 2.
Two modes, like two different settings.
Exactly. Imagine having two co-pilots in your brain, each with their own style of navigating, right?
Two co-pilots. I like that. Okay, so introduce us to co-pilot number 1. What is System 1 all about?
System 1 is all about speed. It's the super fast automatic part of your brain, no real effort required, and you're not even really aware of it. It's like your gut feeling, your instant reaction.
Okay, give me an example. When does System 1 take charge?
Easy. Imagine you're crossing the street and suddenly you hear a car horn blaring. Boom. System 1 kicks in, you jump back, no time to think. Or picture this, you're driving and the car ahead slams on the brakes. Your foot hits the brake pedal before you've even consciously registered what's happening. Pure System 1.
Right. It's like that instinctive reaction. So efficient.
It is. And you know what? It's not just about dodging danger. System 1 is behind a lot of expertise, too. Think about a top chess player. They look at the board and just know the right move. Not from calculating everything, but from years of seeing patterns. It's like they see the whole game in a flash.
Or like a doctor who can often diagnose a patient just by looking at them, drawing on years of experience.
Exactly. It's intuition, but it's intuition built on a foundation of knowledge and practice. And, even in everyday life, System 1 is working wonders. You walk into a room and just sense that people were talking about you, or you immediately know that the driver next to you is texting and not paying attention. That's System 1, always on the lookout, keeping us safe and informed.
Fascinating. So we've got System 1, the fast and furious one. Now, what about System 2? What's this co-pilot style?
System 2 is the thoughtful one, the slow and steady thinker. This is the part of your brain that loves logic and calculation, and it's the one that's active when you're learning something new or solving a really tough problem.
So like when I'm trying to figure out my taxes or if I'm learning a new language?
Bingo. That's System 2 in action. And here's the crucial thing. System 2 can actually step in and say, hold on a second, System 1, let's think this through. It can override those initial impulses.
So it's the voice of reason, the one that says, wait, maybe jumping to conclusions isn't the best idea right now.
Exactly. Think about trying to find your friend in a crowded place. You're actively searching, scanning faces, concentrating. That's System 2, taking the wheel. Or you're trying to parallel park in a tight spot. You're focusing, thinking through the steps. That's System 2, hard at work. But, and this is a big but, System 2 is a little lazy, I have to admit.
Lazy? How so?
Well, using System 2 takes effort, mental energy. And let's be honest, our brains like to conserve energy whenever possible. So System 2 often just accepts whatever System 1 suggests without putting up too much of a fight. It's like, sure, System 1, you seem to have this, I'll just chill here.
So that leads us to, you guessed it, heuristics and biases. These are the mental shortcuts System 1 uses, the ones that can sometimes trip us up.
Exactly. Heuristics, they're basically mental rules of thumb. They're efficient. They help us make quick judgments in a complex world. But because they are shortcuts, they can lead to predictable errors, which we call biases.
So, like, taking the scenic route versus the highway, the scenic route might be prettier, but it can also take a lot longer.
That's a great way to put it. So, let's unpack some of these common mental shortcuts, starting with the availability heuristic.
Okay, availability heuristic. What's that all about?
Well, the availability heuristic is like this. We tend to judge the likelihood of something happening based on how easily examples come to mind. So if you can easily think of examples of something, you're more likely to overestimate how common or probable it is.
So if I just watched a movie about a shark attack, I might suddenly think I'm way more likely to get attacked by a shark, even though it's incredibly rare.
Precisely. The more vivid or recent the memory, the stronger the effect. Like if you just read a news story about a house fire, You might start to worry more about your own house catching fire.
Makes sense. So our brains latch onto those readily available examples, even if they don't actually represent the true probability.
It's like our minds are saying, hey, if I can remember it easily, it must happen all the time. But Kahneman and Tversky, they also pointed out something called the unexplained unavailability heuristic. And it's kind of the opposite.
Unexplained unavailability. What's that?
So imagine you're trying to recall examples of something, but you're drawing a blank. It's unexpectedly hard to think of examples.
Okay, I've had that happen. You feel a little, I don't know, stupid.
Maybe, yeah. But the point is, that very feeling, the difficulty of retrieving those examples, can actually lead you to underestimate how common that thing really is.
Interesting. So it's not just about what we remember easily, but also about what we struggle to remember. Okay, so availability heuristic. Got it. What are the next mental shortcut?
Next up is the representativeness heuristic. This is where we judge the probability of something belonging to a category based on how well it fits our stereotype of that category.
Stereotype. So like we see someone who looks like a certain profession and we just assume that's what they do.
Kind of. So imagine you meet someone who's super into philosophy, reads all the time, and is kind of quiet and introspective.
Okay, I'd probably guess they're a professor or a writer.
Right. But here's the thing. Statistically speaking, there are way more people who aren't professors or writers who fit that description. But we ignore those base rates, those statistical probabilities, because this person just seems so representative of our idea of a professor or writer.
It's like that whole thing about Einstein supposedly failing math.
Yeah, exactly. It fits our image of the eccentric genius so perfectly that we want to believe it even though it's not true.
So representativeness is about judging by appearances, by how well something fits our mental picture, rather than looking at the actual statistics.
Right, and a really famous example of this is the Linda problem. People are given a description of Linda, someone who's really passionate about social justice. Then they're asked to judge which statement about Linda is more probable.
Okay, give me the statements.
Okay, so statement A, Linda is a bank teller. Statement B, Linda is a bank teller and is active in the feminist movement. Which one seems more likely?
Well, B seems more like Linda based on her description.
Right, that's what most people say. But here's the catch. Statement A is actually more probable. It's statistically more likely for Linda to be a bank teller than to be both a bank teller and active in the feminist movement. It's about basic probability. The probability of two things happening together can never be higher than the probability of just one of those things happening.
I guess my system one got tricked by how well B matched Linda's description.
Exactly. It created a more compelling, coherent story, even if it defied logic.
Wow. Okay, so we've got availability and representativeness. What's next?
The anchoring effect. This one is all about how the first piece of information we encounter, the anchor, can really sway our judgment.
Okay, like dropping an anchor in the ocean. It kind of sets the spot.
Right. So even if we know that anchor is arbitrary, our minds still tend to adjust our estimates from that starting point, even when it makes no logical sense.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Give me an example of how this works.
Picture this. You're asked, was Gandhi more or less than 140 years old when he died? Then you're asked to guess his actual age at death. Now, someone else has asked the same questions, but the first question is, was Gandhi more or less than 35 years old when he died?
Okay, I see where this is going. The first person with that high anchor of 140, they're going to guess a much higher age than the second person.
Exactly. It's crazy how powerful that initial number is, even when it's completely random. And the thing is, this anchoring effect happens all the time in real life. Think about negotiating the price of, well, anything.
Like buying a car or negotiating a salary.
Exactly. The first offer, even if it's ridiculous, can anchor you.
So how do we break free from these anchors?
Well, we have to consciously fight against them. Kahneman says just being aware of the anchoring effect can help, but you can also try to actively generate counterarguments to the anchor.
So if someone offers a ridiculously high price for that car, I should come back with reasons why that's way too much, not just counter with a slightly lower but still inflated number.
Exactly. Don't let their anchor drag you down. Do your research, know your own limits, and don't be afraid to push back. Okay, ready for the last heuristic in this section. It's the law of small numbers.
Law of small numbers. Isn't that counterintuitive? The smaller the sample size, the less reliable the data, right?
You'd think so, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
But we often fall into the trap of thinking that small samples accurately reflect the bigger picture.
So, like, if I flip a coin 5 times and get heads every time, I might start thinking the coin is rigged.
Exactly. It's called the gambler's fallacy. We have this deep-seated belief that things should even out, even in small samples. But the truth is, in small samples, random fluctuations can have a huge impact.
So small samples can be misleading.
Yes. Let's say you read a study about a new weight loss program that was tested on 10 people and they all lost weight. Sounds amazing, right? But with such a small sample size, it's hard to tell if the results are due to the program or just random chance.
It could just be a fluke.
Exactly. And, Kahneman talks about a really interesting example from his time advising the Israeli Air Force. After the Yom Kippur War, some squadrons had way more losses than others.
Oh, wow.
And there was this urge to figure out what those unlucky squadrons were doing wrong. But Kahneman argued that statistically, with a small number of aircraft in battles, some squadrons were just bound to have more losses, purely due to chance. It wasn't necessarily about skill or tactics.
So sometimes what looks like a pattern is just random variation.
Exactly. And that's an important thing to remember in life. We often see patterns where none exist, especially when we're dealing with small amounts of data.
Okay, I'm starting to see how these mental shortcuts can really lead us astray. So let's shift gears a bit and talk about cognitive ease and strain. What's that about?
Okay, so cognitive ease and strain. It's about how easy or difficult it is to process information. And our brains, they actually use these feelings of ease and strain as cues to make judgments.
So if something is easy to understand, we're more likely to believe it.
In a nutshell, yes. If information is presented in a clear, familiar way, we tend to feel cognitive ease and are more likely to accept it as true, even if it's not.
So like those kitschy sayings or slogans that just stick in your head.
Yes. Rhymes, simple language, bold fonts, they all create a sense of cognitive ease. And our brains go, oh, this feels good. This must be true. It's part of what's called the illusion of truth.
So we're more likely to believe something just because it's presented in a way that's easy on the brain.
Exactly. And the scary part is this can be manipulated. Think about propaganda or misleading advertising.
So even if the content is false, if it's presented in a way that feels familiar and comfortable, we might be more likely to fall for it.
That's the danger. Now, on the other hand, when we encounter something that's difficult to understand, that's cognitive strain. And that's when System 2 gets called in.
So strain is good in this case. It makes us think harder.
Right. Cognitive strain is like a signal to System 2 saying, hey, pay attention. This requires some effort.
Yeah.
And so we slow down, we analyze, we become more critical.
So cognitive ease can lead to complacency, while cognitive strain can trigger deeper thinking.
You got it. It's a fascinating dynamic. Okay, ready to talk about framing effects?
Framing effects, bring it on. I've got a feeling this one's going to be good.
Framing effects are all about how the way information is presented, how it's framed, can totally change our decisions, even if the underlying choices are the same.
So it's all about presentation.
Exactly. A classic example is how we react to risk. Let's say there's a new medical treatment. You're told it has a 90% survival rate. Sounds pretty good, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Now, imagine you're told that same treatment has a 10% mortality rate. It's the same information, just framed differently. But studies show that people are much more likely to choose the treatment when it's framed in terms of survival, a positive frame, rather than mortality, a negative frame.
That's incredible. Same treatment, different reactions just because of how it's presented.
It's amazing, isn't it? And framing effects pop up everywhere. Think about how political issues are presented. The same policy can sound totally different depending on which aspects are emphasized.
So we need to be really aware of how information is being framed and maybe even try to reframe it ourselves to see if our gut reaction changes.
Yeah, absolutely. Always question the frame. Okay, now buckle up for loss aversion.
Loss aversion, oh boy. I have a feeling this is going to hit close to home.
Loss aversion is a big one. It's the idea that losing something hurts way more than gaining something of equal value feels good.
Like, if I lose a $50 bill, it's going to ruin my day, but finding a $50 bill, well, that's nice, but it doesn't have the same emotional punch.
Exactly. That's loss aversion at work. And it explains a lot of our behavior, like why we're so reluctant to get rid of things, even if we don't really use them.
Oh, the clutter in my house is suddenly making a lot more sense.
It's a classic case of the endowment effect, where we overvalue things we own simply because they're ours. There was this experiment where people were randomly given coffee mugs. Then they were asked how much they would sell them for. And guess what? They wanted way more money for their mugs than people were willing to pay to buy those same mugs.
Just because they own them for a few minutes.
Exactly. Owning something even briefly creates this sense of attachment, and giving it up feels like a loss.
And that loss feels bigger than any potential gain.
Right. Loss aversion can also make negotiations really tough because every concession you make feels like a loss, even if you're getting something in return.
It's like we're wired to protect what we have, even if it might be holding us back.
Exactly. It's a powerful force. Okay, ready for our last big topic.
Hit me with it.
Let's talk about probabilities,
Mm-hmm.
specifically small probabilities. Our brains, well, they don't always handle those very well.
So like winning the lottery or getting struck by lightning, those kinds of things.
Exactly. We tend to overestimate the likelihood of rare events, and that's partly because of things like vivid imagery and media coverage. If you see a dramatic news report about a plane crash, you might suddenly feel like flying is super dangerous, even though it's statistically very safe.
Right. The news can definitely skew our perceptions.
It plays into what Kahneman calls the possibility effect. We overemphasize the possibility of something happening, even if the probability is super low. Like with the lottery, we focus on the possibility of winning millions, and that excitement overshadows the tiny odds.
It's like our emotions hijack our rational understanding of probabilities.
Exactly. And then there's the certainty effect. We really, really value things that are certain. So if you can increase the probability of something good happening from, say, 99% to 100%, that feels like a huge jump, even though it's just a 1% difference.
So our brains aren't always logical when it comes to probabilities. We get swayed by emotions, vivid imagery, and the allure of certainty.
Right. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. We've talked about System 1 and System 2, those two co-pilots in our brains, and all the ways they can lead us to make decisions that aren't always in our best interests. But the good news is, just knowing about these biases can help us make better choices.
So awareness is key.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
The first step is recognizing when System 1 is likely to take over. If you're facing a really important decision, slow down, engage System 2. Think things through. Don't just go with your gut.
So when the stakes are high, it's time to switch from autopilot to manual control.
Exactly. And remember, you have tools to combat these biases. To fight the anchoring effect, actively search for information that challenges the initial anchor. To avoid the representativeness trap, think about the base rates. How common is this thing in the real world? Don't just rely on stereotypes.
And when it comes to framing, try to reframe the problem in different ways to see if your preferences change.
Right. And when you're facing a potential loss, remember, broad framing can help. Instead of focusing on the individual loss, zoom out and see it as part of a bigger picture. It can soften the blow.
It's like taking a step back to gain a wider perspective. So it sounds like it's all about being more mindful, more aware of how our minds work and the tricks they can play on us.
That's the essence of it. We can't eliminate System 1, and we wouldn't want to. It's a vital part of our thinking. But we can learn to recognize when it's likely to lead us astray and when we need to call in the more analytical System 2.
This has been such a fascinating exploration. So to recap, we've learned about the two systems in our brains. System 1, the fast, intuitive one, and System 2, the slower, more deliberate one. And we've explored some of the common biases that can trip us up, like availability, representativeness, anchoring, and loss aversion. But armed with this knowledge, we're better equipped to make more informed, rational choices.
Exactly. And, just being aware of these cognitive quirks can help us understand ourselves and others better. Why do we make the choices we do? Why are we so easily swayed by certain things? It's all part of the fascinating tapestry of human cognition.
So here's a challenge for everyone listening. Think about the last big decision you made. Which system was in charge? Did any of these biases sneak in? And knowing what you know now, would you do anything differently?
That's a great question to ponder, and this deep dive has really only scratched the surface. There's so much more to explore in the world of behavioral economics and cognitive psychology. So keep learning, keep questioning, and keep those two co-pilots in check.
And that's a wrap on another deep dive. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.